Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I thought it would be really interesting to check in on what's going on in Mississauga. It's been a year since I was very involved in the city of Mississauga and a by-election, and so I thought it'd be really interesting to find out sort of what's happening and talk a little bit about it with Brad Butt, who I actually interviewed about a year ago on what his hopes were for the city going forward. Brad Butt is a former member of Parliament, Conservative member of Parliament for the Streetsville area, Mississauga Streetsville, and he's for the last two terms been a
Just
city
one.
councillor. Just one, okay.
This is just my first term as city councillor. Yeah.
Well, it
just
seems like you've been there
long.
for a long time.
It
You've had
just
such an
seems
impact.
longer.
And in Ward 11, which is sort of the same area of Streetsville in Mississauga. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Nice to be here.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about budget, expenditures, etc. Because two of the issues that people have been talking about as I've sort of made the circuits in Mississauga lately have been the city budget and the police budget. I guess the city budget was up over 8%, almost 9%, and the police budget was up 23%. Tell me about the process of budget making in Mississauga and how you feel about the city of Mississauga budget.
Yeah, so we'll start with the city one, and then we can certainly talk about police budget as well. As far as the city's concerned, I mean, we're facing the same inflationary pressures that average people on the street are facing. When you go to the grocery store, you pay more. When you go to the gas station, you pay more. And so do municipalities. So part of the reason the budget increased by the budget, not the tax rate, but the budget increased by 8% in the city of Mississauga had to do with obviously our labor agreements, what are paying our staff, and those inflationary pressures that we've had. It costs a heck of a lot more to run a bus up and down the street now than it did when we didn't have the inflationary pressures around the cost of diesel and maintenance and so on, right? Think about fire department, community centers, libraries, arenas, roads. I mean, all the roads that we have to maintain. So we do have those inflationary pressures. Now, the other thing that did increase Mississauga's budget was a decision council did make, and I did support this as well. We have decided to move to citywide windrow clearing for snow. So the snow that's at the end of your driveway that often becomes a big mound, is very tough to remove. We've actually voted in favor of moving towards citywide clearing of that. And that did add about 1.2% onto that overall budget increase of the 8 that you had mentioned. So there is no doubt that we opted to improve the level of service to people. But when you do that, you got to pay for it. So the net impact was a 3.3% increase on the city's portion of the property taxes that you pay, which is about 38% of the overall total that you pay in property taxes. So it was 3.3 on 38%. And I think given this day and age, I think that was a pretty reasonable increase in the city.
So 8% is reasonable. Is that correct?
I think an 8% budget increase was reasonable for this year, given the inflationary pressures. Now, we've started to see now with the ending of the carbon tax and some of the other things, we're starting to see some of those inflationary pressures come down. So hopefully as we move into the 2026 year, we're going to see the impact of those costs come down, and therefore we can get something that's more moderate. But we really got walloped with inflationary cost increases in 2024 and 2025, and that's one of the reasons the taxes went up as much as they did.
So Brad, sorry, Councillor, I apologize. You're a fiscal conservative. You ran for the Conservative Party. I've always respected you from a sort of a fiscal constraint kind of standpoint. I went back and took a look at the expenditures. The expenditures of the budget increases in the city of Mississauga have been over 8% for more than 5 years. Is that sustainable, that we can continue? Inflation's down, 2 to 3%, nationally. Can we sustain that kind of increases? And the property taxes are, a whole different story. But just the city of Mississauga itself is over 8% for more than 5 years.
Yeah, and that is a significant challenge that we've had. And you're right, it started before I became a councillor, and it certainly has been that way in the 2 years, or the 2 fiscal years, I guess, that I've been a councillor now in the city of Mississauga. The cost pressures on municipalities are tremendous. The senior levels of government are not stepping up to the plate in any way, shape, or form like they should be. They're doing a little bit. Here's a check, and here's something here, and maybe we'll partner with you on this project or that project. But for the most part, we get very little support from the senior levels of government, which means all of those cost pressures are directly on the property tax bill. But is 8% sustainable year after year? No, it is not. And we've got to do a better job.
One of your peers, Alvin Tedjo, running for mayor a year ago, said he was going to freeze taxes. And Deepa D'Amelio, another one of the candidates for mayor, said she'd cap it at inflation. Were they just naive when they said that you could bring expenses down to either 0% increase or 3% increase, or would they have had different strategies than the balance of council had?
I think zero was impractical. The only way you could do zero is you have to raid the reserve funds. I mean, you just have to say, you know what, all that money that we saved to build a community center 5 years from now, we're just going to take that money today to keep taxes down. I'm not quite sure that's a very responsible way of doing budgeting. We have to budget for both capital expenses, so building that new community center, building that new bridge, building a new fire station, etc. We have to budget for that over a period of time and fund it. And then we also have the regular operating expenses we have day in and day out, such as salaries, which is the lion's share of obviously what we are spending taxpayers' money on, is paying our staff to do their jobs every day. Those inflationary pressures haven't really gone by the wayside. In fact, they're probably higher, because what we're finding now in our negotiations with our collective agreements with our unions is that the pressure is on for salary increases that are beyond what would be an average kind of rate of inflation. So, could we have well, we did come in at 3%. I mean, if Councillor Demerla, when she was running for mayor, said 3% was the number, well, that's exactly what we came in with. Not the increase in the budget expenditure, but the actual net increase on the property tax bill. That's what most people...
So if I could, and this is one of the things that I'm very unsatisfied with, the way that you calculate the 3%, and I know you know this, the way you calculate the 3% is what you take is the increase in the Mississauga taxes, and you divide it by the Mississauga taxes and the Peel taxes. And then you take the Peel taxes and you divide it by the Mississauga taxes and the Peel taxes, and it's another 3-point-something%. And those two together equal the 8% overall. But if you divide Mississauga taxes this year or Mississauga expenses this year by Mississauga taxes last year or Mississauga expenses last year, you get to the 8%. So you did, and you have increased, the city of Mississauga has increased it over 8% for 5 years, even though from a publicity standpoint, and I think this is really wrong, too often the public relations is about this 3%, and it's been criticized by people at Marinette and other people as potentially wrong. So I don't think you've increased it 3%. The Mississauga taxes have the Mississauga expenses have produced a 3% increase on the overall Peel and Mississauga collective expenses. Peel another more than 3%, and together the total amount is 8%. But each piece by itself is over 8%, and Peel at 9%. Yeah. The other issue, I think, is Peel Police, which was a shocking 23%. And so I really want to talk about that next, if we could. But on Mississauga by itself, let me ask you one last question, if I could. We hear from the United States Doge and Elon Musk, and all the things he's doing to take a look at the budget and take out waste, and then even Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, talking about AI and all the things they're going to do to take out waste, and that they think they can get the operating budget increases in the federal government to inflation. Are we doing enough in Mississauga to take a look at our expense structure?
Yeah, we probably could be doing more. We probably could be. I don't think we're going to do a Doge exercise, because I think Doge is firing a bunch of frontline people that actually deliver services to people on a day-to-day basis they care about. Are we going to start firing firefighters in Mississauga? We're going to start firing people that run our community centers and plow the snow. I don't think that's where we want to go. Now, Does that mean we can't do a better job of looking at our expenditures, looking at our staff ratios to the services that are provided? Absolutely, we can be doing a better job, and we should be doing a better job on that. But if we're talking about firing a bunch of frontline people that actually deliver services that our citizens rely on in Mississauga, I don't think there's a single member of council that believes that that's the route to go. But we
I
do
agree
need
with
to.
that. And I
But we
think
do need to a bit. We do need to do a better job.
most people think that Doge went way too far and harmed what was going on in the United States. But even Bernie Sanders, left wing independent senator in the United States, supported the initial ideas of Doge to take a look at waste. Do we have waste that can be looked at in Mississauga?
There's probably some, but I really don't think there's a lot. I've been there 2 years. Mayor Parrish asked me to chair the budget committee. I've been doing that over the last 2 years. I have regular meetings with our finance staff. We go through different things. Sure, I guess you probably could look here and there and say, look, could we not cut that back, or could we not reduce the level of service here? And, are we a little too top heavy with some staff in these departments? I'm fairly sure that we could look at that and we could find some of that. But I think Mississauga has been a well-run city under the leadership of multiple mayors, dating back to the Hazel McCallion days. Good councils, good senior leadership team, and finance people who have really run the city like a business. I think in many ways, although we're not a business, we're government, and we're here to provide services to people. But at the end of the day, I think Mississauga has done a good job. I think the Region of Peel, generally speaking, for its 50 years of existence, has done a good job. I know we're going to talk about police later, but generally speaking, when you look at those two levels of government, I would still say we have done an awfully good job in Mississauga and Peel of running efficient local government.
We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with Councillor Brad Butt from Ward 11 in Mississauga in just 2 minutes and talk about Peel Police budget, which was up by 23% this year over last year. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I got Councillor Brad Butt. He's the councillor for Ward 11, Mississauga Streetsville on the Mississauga City Council. He's also on Peel Regional Council. And we've just been talking about the budget increases in Mississauga. He thinks Mississauga is well run and efficient and justified the over 8% increase in the Mississauga taxes. But Councillor Butt, I got to ask you, 23% Peel Police budget increase? I was broken into twice last year. And so I think that we've got to have good police, and maybe our policing system wasn't where it was, and crime's a problem, breaking in entries and carjackings and things like that. People hear about on a fairly regular basis. We even had, gunshots in Port Credit. So I think that crime is an issue, but 23% increase in the police budget? Seriously?
Yeah, there were a number of us that were shocked, quite frankly, that was the ask that came in from the Peel Police Services Board. And just so your listeners understand how it works, I mean, with policing across Ontario, we have independent police services boards. They're made up of provincial appointees and citizen appointees, and along with the police chief, they develop the budget, and then they develop the taxes that they're going to need from the Region of Peel, and that's what they submit to us and ask. We can try and challenge it, we can try and fight it, but at the end of the day, the legislation is very, very clear. Whatever the police ask for in the amount of money that they need to be allocated to them through the regional taxes, Region of Peel taxes, essentially get funded. Now, some of us, when we had the police chief and the services board members in front of regional council, there were some of us that were really challenging the need for that large of an expenditure increase in 1 year. The need for the 300 net new civilian or net new uniformed police officers, and the 55 or 65, I'd have to look back at the number again, civilian employees also to get hired. Those are the backup people that are helping the police, do their job, and the administrative personnel, 911 operators, that kind of thing. That was an extremely large increase in staff complement in just 1 year. And there were some of us saying, can you not phase that in over a number of years. So the tax impact is less. And essentially, at the end of the day, a majority of the members of Peel Regional Council, on a vote of 15-9, voted in favor of the police budget. That's why it is. I voted again. I voted against it. I'm only one vote. I voted against it. I thought it was too high, and I tried to do my best to get it lowered. And unfortunately, we weren't successful.
You know, there's been some comments about it, but not a lot. If the OPP increased their budget by 23% or RCMP increased their budget by 23%, that'd be front page news of the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail, the Sun. What's going on? Why didn't
well, in fact, the OPP, in fact, I don't know how many of your listeners know this or not, but the region, all of the region Peel is not policed by Peel Regional Police. The town of Caledon is still policed under a contract with the OPP. The OPP did significantly increase their asks for those municipalities, but guess what the province did? The province stepped in and funded that increase, so that the OPP contract services that we pay at the region of Peel for the town of Caledon went up very little, because the province actually stepped in and funded, mainly because they're mainly rural municipalities. I guess the province felt a little bit more closely aligned with rural municipalities throughout the province. They came in. They provided an injection of, I think it was like $100 million or something in the province for all of these OPP services across Ontario. So Caledon got subsidized by the province, but guess what? Mississauga and Brampton taxpayers through Peel Regional Police got zero.
If you go up by 23%, you got to hire all these extra uniformed police officers. Doesn't that suggest we've done something wrong last year or historically? We underfunded or something? Like we didn't have the kind of police force we needed?
One of the arguments that I know Chief Nishandariappa and a couple of the police services board members have made to us is they've said, because of the many years where the funding increase was very small at the Region of Peel Police, and the number of officers they hired was very small, 20, 25, 30, right? Not 300 like they're asking for in 2025. Some of these folks have said, hey, it's catch-up time. I don't like that argument. I don't think that's a good enough argument to whack half the property tax increase to taxpayers in the Region of Peel with Peel Police alone. Half of that tax increase is police. The other half is the basic services that we all rely on. So the police took half. That was too much in 1 year. It was too much in 1 year. Yes, I understand the catch-up argument. We do have one of the lowest number of police officers to population ratios of large urban municipalities across the country. I don't deny that. I don't like the numbers game so much. I like service level. What's an appropriate service level for Peel, Mississauga, Brampton, because Caledon's not included. But I think that's how you should look at policing. I don't think you look at it by saying, Montreal has 220 officers for every one person, or 220 for every 1,000 people, and Peel has 140. Well, Peel's not Montreal. Montreal's not Peel. So let's make sure our staff complement is appropriate for policing in our region, but let's also make sure that it's something that we can actually afford.
Yeah, I think actually afford is critically important, but what we need, I think, is also critically important. And I think that everyone in Mississauga regrettably understands that crime's gone up. There's been so many so much talk about home invasions, carjackings, police issues in regards to gunshots, as I mentioned, and poor credit and insurance rates in Peel and in Brampton being some of the highest in the province because of car thefts, etc. As I mentioned, I was personally broken into twice in 6 months. And I think that story is very prevalent. At a neighborhood meeting in my area recently, everyone was talking about a rash of break-ins in the area, and neighborhood watches have been increased because of that. Mm-hmm. So I got to ask you, if police budget goes up by 23%, and it's, I presume they think needed, and the police board thinks it's needed, does the population get mad at the current people that are increasing it by 23%, or the past people that were in charge that allowed it to be underfunded and create a situation where crime was too prevalent? Like, Who's at fault here? The people that are increasing
Well,
it 23% now, or the people in the past that didn't increase it and allowed crime to grow? If I presume that's what happened, crime grew.
yeah, well, you know what? I'm sure there's blame to be assessed on both of those areas. That maybe all of those years we just weren't keeping up with a more appropriate level of increase for Peel Regional Police, so that we could build on it each and every year. And now all of a sudden we've come to this year, and where yes, crime is very visible and very impactful with people now, because individuals are getting specifically impacted themselves through, as you mentioned, break and enter, auto theft, went skyrocketed. It's come back down again, thank God, because of a number of different initiatives that have taken place. And just the regular crime. I mean, the chief will tell you that domestic violence is like the number one issue that, essentially, that officers are dealing with right now, and it is skyrocketing.
Seriously, domestic violence, really?
Domestic violence is one of the top things that Peel Police are either intervening in when they get to a location where it's taking place, or doing the follow-up, once that has taken place. It's through the roof. And so I'll leave it up to the police chief to decide how officers should be deployed. Politicians should not be doing that, right? That is absolutely the chief. And one of the things the chief did say, with these 300 net new officers, they're predominantly going to be frontline officers. So hopefully what that's going to mean is, even though we're upset about what the cost is and what the tax impact is, if those 300 net new officers are out in the community more prevalently, can respond quicker, can whatever, then at least you might be able to make the argument you're getting value for what you're paying for in this increase for the police service. So time will tell. But I mean, I think the chief believes that this is a very good way to get us back to an area where people will feel safer, where the response from police will be quicker and stronger. And as they say, we'll have to see how this evolves once they're on board, and then others that will come on board in future years as they continue to grow the service. But hopefully the growth will be more modest and better reflect the ability for the taxpayers to pay.
So, Councillor, I don't know about you. You probably talk to a million more people than I do, but people don't feel safe. There is a real concern about crime in Mississauga and Brampton. So I think people want increased police presence and are really requesting it, if not demanding it.
Yep. Oh, there's no question about it, and we do hear about it. And of course, I talk to constituents all the time. They want where is the police officer doing a speed trap? Where is the police officer when we've called because our car was stolen, and we get an email a week later saying fill this form out, but nobody comes to their house, nobody talks to them, nobody investigates, and that is a resource management issue for the police. There's no question about it. I'm not saying for one moment that we are staffing is adequate. It is inadequate for large urban municipalities that Mississauga and Brampton have become now. But again, we've still got to be able to, I think, have this right balance between level of service that people want and expect, and again, the ability to be able to pay for it. And without any help from the senior levels of government, it'll all continue to be on the backs of the property taxpayers.
One of your peer councillors, I won't mention who, had a community meeting this past week and blamed Brampton for the crime problems and the cost of policing in Peel. Is that fair?
The crime stats show that we're about even. Brampton may have slightly higher number, and of course their population now is actually over Mississauga's. So I don't think it's fair enough just to say we're blaming this all on Brampton. I'll tell you the one thing that is not right that the province needs to change, and that's the funding formula for Peel Regional Police. Because Mississauga pays about 62% of that bill, and Brampton pays 38%, yet our populations are basically the same. The assessment should be on population. It should not be based on the assessed value of properties in each community. So Mississauga, our average assessment is higher than Brampton. Therefore, we get whacked with a higher percentage of the costs of Peel Regional Police. So if the councillor you're talking about was saying Brampton's a problem because they're not paying their fair share, that is absolutely correct. There's no question about that at all. It should be a
Councillor,
50-50 cost share, not 62-38.
the councillor then went on to say that they were supportive of separation of Mississauga from Brampton, and that would have solved the problem. But Peel Police was never going to be split into two, was it?
That was never my assumption. Even if we'd gone through with dissolution of regional government, my personal view was we would still have Peel Regional Police, probably Peel paramedics, and probably Peel Public Health. They would become independent service bodies, but they would continue to operate as they did. It's the other services we talked about that would no longer be delivered by a senior level of municipal government, the region of Peel. Everything would get delivered by the local tier, roads, waste management, some of the other services that the region does now that could come to the city. We've always believed in Mississauga we can deliver those more efficiently for the taxpayers if we ran them directly rather than running them through the region. I think Brampton probably could as well. And so that was the thought. But Peel Regional Police, to the best of my knowledge, that was never on the radar screen to be divided up into a Mississauga police service and a Brampton police service.
Councillor, I'm looking for a new house, and I've been looking in Mississauga. I've also looked in Toronto. I've also looked.
Come to Streetsville. Come to Streetsville.
The property taxes for a comparable house in Mississauga are not quite double, but substantially more than Toronto, and really more than Oakville. What are we doing wrong in Mississauga such that our taxes are so much higher?
A couple of things. One is that in the case of Toronto, they have used their industrial, commercial, and their multi-residential rental apartment building tax classes to artificially subsidize the residential property taxpayers, people in single-family homes and townhouses, whatever, that are owned. So Toronto has been notorious for decades of basically having their ICI and multi-res class pay the lion's share and giving a break to the homeowners. Mississauga was never set up that way from day one. Hazel always had a premise that, you have a strong industrial commercial tax base, but you can't tax the heck out of them because they're not going to come to Mississauga and operate in Mississauga if you do that. And you've got to have a more balanced approach to how the residential tax base is assessed. I think we've got the right model. I think we've got the right balance, but you're absolutely right. If you just want to compare a 2,500 square foot home in Etobicoke with a 2,500 square foot home in Mississauga, the home in Mississauga is going to be taxed higher.
Why is Oakville and Halton cheaper?
That's a good question. I'd have to look at how it works with them, with their how they handle their tax base, and what relationship they have between what Halton actually delivers versus the area municipalities versus how we're set up. Different regional governments do it different ways. And again, we haven't had reassessment in this province since 2016, I think. Nobody's been reassessed except new homes that have been built. So again, maybe the assessment base, which is controlled by the province, maybe that's got to be relooked at, and maybe Mississauga houses are being unfairly assessed at a certain level, meaning that the overall property taxes they pay are higher.
We're chatting with Councillor Brad Butt, Council for Ward 11, Streetsville, Mississauga, Streetsville, in the city of Mississauga, also on the Region of Peel Council, about budget increases, both at the city of Mississauga, the Region of Peel, as well as for Peel Regional Police. I could also talk about the Board of Education, but while we have to pay for that, I don't think you've got much control, regrettably, about the Board of Education, which was also up an unbelievable amount. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with Councillor Butt in just 2 minutes. And we're going to talk about a couple of other issues going on in the city of Mississauga. Stay with us, everyone. Back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight with Councillor Brad Butt, Ward Council for Council Seat 11, Mississauga Streetsville, on the City of Mississauga Council, Peel Regional Council, etc. And he's just corrected me. He said that the Board of Education taxes have been frozen. Is that correct?
That is correct. It had 15 years or longer. It's been the exact same tax rate, both for the residential and the industrial commercial tax class. I forget the percentage of what it is off the top of my head, but no, the province of Ontario levies education taxes, and those haven't increased in 15 years.
So I took a look at the Board of Education expenses, and they're up greater than
Oh,
inflation.
yes.
So that's
Yep.
just funded
Yep.
by the province.
That's fun. See, the whole thing is that all that money just goes into a pool, and then the provincial government decides how they spread it out throughout the province of Ontario to individual school boards. There isn't necessarily a relationship between exactly how many dollars come out of Mississauga, as an example, that would go to the Peel district and the Dufferin Peel Catholic school boards. It's all based on student enrollment and other programs that they run, and then that's how their budgets are set by the trustees and then funded by the province. But the property taxes towards education have not gone up in more than 15 years.
Well, that's helpful for the taxpayer, but from a overall standpoint, there is only one taxpayer. We have to pay the provincial rates as well, and the Board of Education expenses up at almost twice inflation. But I guess we pay that separately through our provincial income taxes. I want to ask you about a couple of other questions, if I could. Development fees. You had this big mayor's task force that took a look at development in Mississauga, and one of the things that came out of that was a dramatic reduction in development fees. Were you supportive of that? And tell me why.
Yeah, well, the mayor put together a housing task force, and she had 30 or more builder developers who have had long history of doing work in Mississauga over many years. You know, we hit a brick wall with building of housing and development for various reasons. And now, as one municipality, and I know the mayor was particularly concerned about this, was, how do we get home building going again? What are some of the challenges we're facing? So interest rates were a problem, and financing, and we can talk about all of that, which we have no control over. But what are things the municipality can do? So if right now we're building nothing, the development charge revenue we're getting is zero. But if we say you build tomorrow and we'll reduce your development charges by 50%, then at least we're getting 50% of the money. Otherwise we'd be getting zero. So at this stage, we're at the point where we're trying to really incent housing to get built. So the 50% reduction in the development charges is something I did support. All members of council, as far as I can remember from the votes, supported it, because we did get expert input from the builder and developer community, which we're thankful for in doing it. And it has sparked applications now coming in. The other thing that the mayor and the task force did that I thought was very smart was they're completely removing development charges for any 3-bedroom units that are built in the city. We don't build enough family units in this city. You can build a 500 square foot shoebox, for somebody, and it'll sit on the market and not move. But we have a desperate need for units that are family size. And so we're really incenting, getting those larger 3-bedroom units for families incented to be built. And the other thing we did is we need rental housing built in the city, not just ownership housing. And we really haven't done a good job for a long time in incenting rental housing to be built. So for a project that's built as a purpose-built rental building in Mississauga now, for the first 35 years that the building is in operation, the municipal property taxes on that building will be reduced by 35% each year over those 35 years. So your actual property tax payments that the landlord is having to make, that he collects through rent from the tenants, is actually going to be lower. It's going to help keep rents down. So, we've done a number of different things. We're going to see what works. We needed to do something. The senior levels of government have praised Mississauga for these new initiatives and what we're trying to do. And hopefully it is going to lead to seeing a lot more housing being proposed and being built over the next couple of years.
So, prior councils in Mississauga didn't have that attitude and were jacking up development fees, and were arguing that development fees were paid by rich developers, not by consumers, and weren't in any way, shape, or form damaging building. Were they wrong? And the current council that's reduced development fees by 50%, and frankly, our new prime minister who's asking for development fees to be reduced by 50%, yep. Right? Or what?
Yeah. Well, I think what's happened is with development charges is I think municipalities got carried away. I think it was just an easy way to get money in the door. quite frankly, builder developers in the good times were willing to pay it. I mean, begrudgingly, but they were willing to pay it because things were getting built, things were getting sold, everybody was making money, everything was fine, right? And so I don't blame past councils. I mean, look, Hazel was the one that brought in the development charges from the beginning, even before legislation allowed municipalities. She said growth has to pay for growth. And I do philosophically agree with Mayor McCallion and others that say growth needs to pay for growth. But I think the modeling is different now. I think the way the world has evolved is different. A lot of the developments in Mississauga are infill. So we already have a lot of the infrastructure already there. There's already a water line running down the street. There's already a sewer line running down the street. They may have to be improved. They may have to be upgraded. But a lot of that infrastructure is already in these neighborhoods where these builders are going to build. See, do you really need 100% development charges for those? I get it when you're in a pasture somewhere where there's no servicing at all on the site. I get it, right? That's a different animal. But a lot of the new development in Mississauga is all infill. And we already have infrastructure there. We have schools, we have hospitals, we have fire stations, we have community centers, etc. Right? They may need to be improved and augmented, expanded possibly. We'll look at those kinds of things. But it's not like the old days when Mississauga was a bunch of farms that got sold and then got built, because you had to build all the infrastructure from scratch. And that's just not the case anymore.
Premier Ford, during the provincial election campaign, made two, I thought, surprising announcements that people have talked about for a long period of time, but he actually announced it. I haven't seen that it's actually been implemented yet, but he announced it, that he was going to do all-day two-way GO train service on the Mississauga-Milton line, starting at Streetsville, I guess, which I was surprised with, but all-day two-way GO train service. And then he was going to do this Midtown Toronto line, which would be from Streetsville all the way out to Scarborough, going through the Summerhill LCBO. So it would give sort of a direct line from Streetsville to Kipling, and then on to Casaloma, Summerhill, Thorncliffe Park, out to Scarborough. What do you think of those two announcements? Are they going to happen, and would they be good for Streetsville and Mississauga?
We would welcome two-way all day on the Milton line. I'm not so familiar with the other one you're mentioning, but it's been a long-standing position of the city of Mississauga long before I became a councillor. I remember Mississauga lobbying me when I was a federal MP about two-way all day service on the Milton GO train line, which of course goes through Streetsville. We've long said that if we have that, now we can have a conversation about more development, bigger development, because we've got the public transit system there to do it. The problem is successive provincial governments, not just Premier Ford, but successive provincial governments have promised two-way all day on the Milton line for 20 years. Yet nobody's put $1 behind it. It's not even really in the Metrolinx master plan. It's kind of mentioned, but it's really not there. There's no commitment. This is not like Eglinton Crosstown or the new Ontario lines that the province is building in Toronto. That stuff is on the books. It's funded. They're moving ahead. There is nothing for the Milton line. People, either this government has to, or get off the pot on this one, or stop talking about it. Because the problem is, if you don't do it and developers still want to come in with massive densities that some of them are proposing in villages like Streetsville, it doesn't work, because you can't have that density if you don't have decent public rapid transit. And without a full GO train line on the Milton line, none of this works. So I would just say to the Premier, show us the money.
He also announced two new stations on the Lakeshore West line, one at Humbertown, the Humber Bay, which makes a ton of sense, and another one at Lakeview. I don't know exactly where it would be, whether it'd be at Cawthra or Ogden. I don't think they even know. But does that make sense to have another station between Long Branch and Port Credit?
Absolutely. I think stations along that Lakeshore line that will improve accessibility, make sure that people are using their cars less, because if they're closer to a GO train station, they may choose to walk rather than another car on Lakeshore Road trying to get to a GO station. All of those are great. That's all excellent. But you got to invest the money to make it happen. So improving the Lakeshore line is a great idea. I think these other transit projects are excellent. We'll have to see how the Hazen McCallion LRT line works up and down here Ontario Street in Mississauga. At least the province has announced the tunneling that's going to go into Brampton now, so we get it right into the Brampton GO train station. That was always crucial to make that thing work. So it goes from Port Credit right to Brampton. It connects all those GO train stations that intersect with Huron Ontario Street. So Cooksville and Dixie and the others. So this stuff's all good as long as it's properly planned for, it's actually on the books as happening, and that it's funded. But these are all great initiatives. If they were going to move more people through public transit, then that's a good thing.
Councillor Brad Butt, Ward 11 in the city of Mississauga. Really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks,
All
Brian.
the best. I look forward to coming in front of your budget committee and asking some questions at some point in time.
Please do.
Something then, because
Please do.
you're a very knowledgeable guy, and I think you're doing a great job. I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Please do. Thanks.
I'm going to take a break and come back with a couple of my own comments on what's going on with the budget in Mississauga in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everyone.